So then we took that and we bought Bitcoin with that. So we started out with we're going to raise the money for general corporate purposes. And along the way, the discussion was, what are you going to do with it? And I said, well, I want to be able to buy Bitcoin with it. And they said, well, we should put that, into the disclosure. I said, yeah, we should disclose that. And then they said, well, are you sure you're going to buy it? And I said, yeah. So eventually it flipped and it became, we're doing it to buy the Bitcoin. So that became, in the history of first, right? We're the first public company to buy Bitcoin on the balance sheet. We're the first public company to declare it a Treasury reserve asset. We became the first public company to do a Dutch auction, which is in essence like an equity issuance to buy Bitcoin, right? It's like I'm either buying my equity back or I'm or issuing the equity. So the first Dutch auction, where the proceeds eventually became Bitcoin. Then the first convertible bond to buy Bitcoin. And I think that all of those things rotated the shareholder base, right? I think the most important thing was to be long Bitcoin, right? So in essence, the first publicly traded company where the shareholder base is long Bitcoin. And it started out, my aspiration was, it'd be great if half of our enterprise value is based upon enterprise software and half is based upon the assets. Because before we did this, we got substantially no credit for the assets. Mm-hmm. Like people were basically taking the 500 million and they're like, okay, well, that's going to be worth zero, right? Or negative.
Because you were 1 times revenue plus just the cash on the balance sheet.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you've got a low growth cash cow, right, that's like being a dentist where you're going to make a lot of money every year for a decade and maybe you'll make 5% more each year for a decade. If you've got a low growth cash cow, but the money supply is debasing at 25% a year.
Kills you.
Right? It's like the road to serfdom is working exponentially harder for a currency getting exponentially weaker. What I saw was 2,000 people doing 100,000 things right every year to make $50 million and then watching the enterprise lose $100 million a year. Mm-hmm. Due to a political decision. So in essence, we're running as hard as we can. We're falling backwards. And the situation was literally hopeless, right? Like people wonder, where did the Bitcoinist hope come from? Well, it just was hopeless, right? I mean, the operating business is hopeless and okay, you're going to work yourself to death for a decade and do a million things right with 2,000 people, and you're going to be worse off in a decade than you are today. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's operationally hopeless, right? And then on the balance sheet, if somebody says we're not even thinking about raising interest rates, it means for the next 4 years, you're going to get 0% on your money and is going to be worth half as much in 36 months as it is worth today. And the balance sheet is hopeless. I think that it's a defensive strategy through the Dutch auction. We had to do the Dutch auction to provide a graceful transition for our shareholders to get long Bitcoin, right? You're either long Bitcoin or you're selling out to us at a premium, one or the other. And then from that point, Bitcoin started moving up and our stock started moving up. And then we realized that the conservative thing to do is just stop there. And if we'd stopped there, I mean, we would be all equity, $475 million invested at $11,000 a coin or something. And that's not a bad result, right? We would have made 6x our money. But what we realized is we could borrow money at 75 basis points. And Bitcoin's up 171% a year every year for a decade, right? If you can borrow money at 1% and invest it at 171%, your arbitrage is 170% on how much? Well, how much do you want, right? Like, where are you going to stop that?
When you borrowed at the 75 basis points, I was impressed. But then you followed it up and you borrowed even more at a 0% interest rate, if I remember correctly. What was the second offering?